Oh, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of First Canada Live. I'm your host, Karthik Kandigas of Apathy, and we are here for a great show tonight. That's right. But before we get started, folks, as Canadians, it is important to recognize the land of which we are a part. As we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we celebrate today. We acknowledge the elders and youth, past, present, and emerging, of all the land on which we work and live. We honor the ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. We acknowledge this land out of respect for the indigenous nations who have cared for Turtle Island, also called North America. The indigenous people have been gifted the role of caretakers of this land long before the arrival of settler peoples until today. But most importantly, we must remember that the history of these lands have been tainted by poor treatment and a lack of friendship with the First Nations who called Canada home before it was given this name. This history is something that everyone is affected by. We all need to think about it. We are all treaty people here in Canada. We all have a shared history to reflect upon, and each of us is affected by this history in different ways. Our past defines our present, but if we move forward as friends and allies, it does not have to define our future. All right, folks, I'd like to welcome our Youth Council co-host for today. She's a member of Team 4617, Dawn from London, Ontario, and a member of the First Canada Youth Council. Say hello to Miriam. How's it going, Miriam?
It's going good. So glad to be here today.
Well, we are so glad to have you. How's your week at school been going?
It's been going good. I have a math test tomorrow.
All right. Oh, so you're just like, I can study, but after First Canada Live, got to keep the priorities straight here, right?
Yep.
We can do a study session during the show if we want. What's the math test on? What's the topic?
Um, it's on exponential laws and exponents and radical functions and stuff.
No problem. We got this. We got this. We got this.
Yeah.
Good. You've got a co-host who's a mathematician. This should be no problem, right? This will be good. Hey, Miriam, thank you so much for being here. And guess what, Miriam? We got a really exciting show going on tonight. We got a
Mhm.
panel discussion with some of your fellow youth council members, so that'll be a lot of fun. We've got a little bit of a spotlight here talking about what it's like to be a First Canada intern. So we got two of our interns from this summer coming on the show, so you can learn a day in the life of an intern, which I think was pretty fantastic. So it's going to be a fantastic show. Those of you who are watching, remember, if you have any questions for us during the show, just drop them into the Twitch chat. We will do our best to answer them when we have a shot. And remember, folks, the reason we're here is have fun and celebrate excellence in our community. So let's remember to keep things positive and keep things in a good light. Hey, and speaking of a good light, Miriam, it's time for our Youth Council Wellness moment. I think you got you got a pretty cool mental health tip for us, right?
I do. I actually have a couple.
Ooh, let's do
So,
it.
so one thing that I actually started in the eighth grade was that I would start writing future letters to myself. So I'd probably sentence them to around 6 months to a year later, and then I would read them. I feel like this helped me reflect on myself and also to see how much I've grown.
Okay, that is pretty neat. So here's a website. It's called futureme.org, and the link is going in chat. So tell us a little bit about this website, Miriam.
So basically, it's a very easy. So you got to select a time that you want to send it to. It can be as short as like a minute later, a day later, a week later, to like even like a couple of years later. So what you do is that you write a letter to yourself in like the text box provided, and then you just send it to the future. And then you input your email, and it'll send it to your email exactly when the time period ends.
And that is pretty cool. I don't do it anymore, but I used to keep a little bit of a journal or a diary or whatever. But that's a neat sort of thing because it's wild how your perspective changes. I go back and look at some of the stuff that I wrote when I was like in high school and university, and I'm just like, wow, that's me. Oh my goodness, I was so angry back then. I was or sad or jaded or something, but you gain perspective over time, and it's interesting you can learn lessons from your past self and your futures, and you can send lessons to your future self, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, what's the next tip you have for us?
So another thing is that I know that as a student, it's really important to take breaks. So I use this thing called a Pomodoro. So a Pomodoro is that you can select any period of time and then you get to take a break after. I feel like this is really important, especially as a student, since you always should have a work-life balance.
That is huge. And like there's been like a number of scientific studies that show that students who take breaks in studying hold information better as opposed to someone who just kind of crams all the way. So like if you're saying like, hey, I'm gonna study for 3 hours, you might actually be more productive if you study for 45 minutes, take 15 minutes, study for 45 minutes, take 15 minutes, and that sort of deal. So do you find that the breaks kind of help you like absorb information?
Yeah, I totally agree. Like sometimes I'll take a walk or drink like a cold glass of water. I feel like it definitely helps me like retain the information more.
Yeah, I definitely like going for a walk. It's just like, okay, I got all this stuff in my head, and you kind of process it as you're walking, or you just like think about something completely different, like you
Yeah.
Think about what's going on there. So that's some great advice, Miriam. Thank you so much. Thanks to the Youth Council for always supporting with these wellness moments. And now we will dive into our news updates. And the biggest update we have, Miriam, the Youth Summit is coming up, right?
Hooray!
Yeah, it is going to be on November 18th. And if you haven't signed up, we encourage you to get signed up right away. Includes a free t-shirt, free lunch. It's for FTC and FRC students, girls and allies, in any of the programs. There's going to be workshops by Centennial College. One of our sponsors, General Motors, is going to have a really cool workshop. We've got some guest speakers, a panel discussion, and some fun activities from the Youth Council, right, Miriam?
Yeah, I went there last year and I had a blast.
All right. So, folks, make sure you sign up. Again, it's taking place Saturday, November 18th at Centennial College. The link to sign up where you can find out all the details, all the things that I probably forgot to tell you about are in chat right now. So hit that one up. Just a reminder, First Canada Live, we are here on Tuesdays once a month in the fall, and then we'll be on a more regular schedule come January for FRC season. So right now, if you want to know about our show schedule, subscribe to this Twitch channel right here and turn on notifications, or you might be listening to us as a podcast right now because we are available on Spotify and Apple. So if you aren't listening to us there, but you're like, yeah, I don't always have time to watch on Twitch or to watch on YouTube, go to Spotify. Link is in chat. Subscribe to the podcast, and it'll be delivered there to you. You listen, taking a break, going for a walk, put on First Canada Live, and then you'll hear Miriam telling you to take a break. It's like this big cycle there. It's like we're in an episode of Loki or something. It's good.
Ooh.
All right, folks. And of course, the Ontario team Slack is still out there. If you're looking for a place to connect with other teams in Ontario, students and mentors are there to chat with you, to answer your questions about your robot and about your first teams for both FRC and FTC. First Canada staffers in there. Great way to get answers to questions, if you're not really an email or sort of phone call person. And then, First Canada Alumni Corner is back on Tuesday, November 22nd at 7 p.m. Miriam, this is a good one for high school students. It's going to be scholarship application strategies with special guest Youth Council alum Mahak Dhaliwal, who was a recipient of many scholarships and will be sharing her tips and tricks on how to tackle scholarship applications, in addition to be discussing all the scholarships available to First and First Canada students. So that is a big one if you're thinking about applying for scholarships. Now, Miriam, you said you're in grade 11, right?
Yep.
But it's never too early to start learning about this stuff, right?
No, I definitely agree. I've attended some university fairs myself.
Yeah, all right. So, sign up for this. Link is in chat, firstroboticscanada.org/alumni corner. That'll be a good one. And trust me, there are so many scholarships out there that people don't realize exist. And also, like, it's super important to learn how to apply for these successfully and what the tips and tricks are. And for folks who are alumni already, don't forget to join the First Canada Alumni LinkedIn group. Link is in chat where you can join there. You can find out about internship opportunities, volunteering opportunities, and network with other alumni potential jobs. Hey, it's a great place to be. All right, folks, that is our news. We're going to get ready for our first segment. But before we do that, we're going to be back in a minute with a word from one of our sponsors, Centerline. All right, we are back, folks, and it is time for our first segment, a panel discussion with our youth council. So let's introduce first. We have from FTC team 22582 and possibly my favorite team name, the Guardians of the Allen Key. We got Ella out here from Hamilton. From FTC Team 16397, relatively Quampton from Brampton, longtime member Muskan is here. And from FTC Team 18846, Robotics from North York, say hello to Daniel. What up, Daniel? And from FTC Team 18844, the Proteins, and FRC Team 7721, UHS Wolfpack, it's ZG. And rounding us out from FRC Team 2702, the Rebels from Kitchener, it's Chloe. Welcome, youth council members. So glad to have you. Some of you have been on this show before, some of you haven't, so we're excited to do this. So today, we're talking about advice for first-year teams. You know, all of you have been around the block a few times on your teams in both FTC and FRC. So, I mean, let's just kind of start this off like a little bit low key, but what is one piece of advice or one thing you wish you knew in your first year first, or you as a first year team member? So maybe we'll just kind of go around the room. Maybe Ella, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. My like biggest piece of advice for any first year teams is just to get into the first community. Like, to be honest, you don't know what you think you know. I was in that position. But there's so much knowledge out there and everybody's always so willing to help. Like obviously the youth summit, plug there, and the and like events like overtime are great, but even smaller events like arranging a practice match with other teams in your area are great to help you feel more supported. It's so worth it and it makes robotics so much more fun.
That's such a good point, Ella. I think if you think about what sets first apart from other types of extracurriculars and that sort of stuff, there's this sort of community, you know, that you reference where everyone's willing to help each other, and you know, like you meet new friends, you meet potential employers, sponsors, all that sort of stuff. So that is a great piece of advice. ZG, what about you?
So one piece of advice that I would give is try absolutely everything. Like go to as many scrimmages as you can, talk with as many teams as you can. Try that weird drivetrain you found on YouTube. Try reaching out to huge companies for like sponsorship. Just try everything you can and just have some fun with it.
I love that one, ZG, especially like just the reaching out to sponsors or whatever. One of my mentors always told me that you can't get what you don't ask for. So just ask the question, what's the worst? Someone might just say no. Okay, no loss. What about you, Chloe?
The biggest piece of advice that I would give to new teams and new students is that you get out of the program what you put in. One of my mentors drills this into our head every season. And if you show up and you try new things, as you said, then you go out to different things and you'll get a ton back from the program. And first is a really special program because you can get a lot of opportunities out of it. So you just got to be ready to like throw yourself at the program.
That's wow. This is like really, really great advice. Also, I think like the advice that Ella and ZG and Chloe have given so far, doesn't just apply to being on a first team. I think that like what Chloe just said, that's with anything, you know, if you're, you know, you're doing the school play or you're trying out for the volleyball team, you get what you put in. And that's really friendships. You get what you put in, you know, it's important to think about. So that's great advice, Chloe. Thank you. Muskan, what about you? By the way, Muskan, you have
My
some fans in the chat right now. I see
oh, did
Muskan and
I?
like 8 fire emoji. So this better be a good answer, okay? Your fan club's waiting you.
Oh, I hope I can please them. My best advice is to make the most of the people you meet at competitions because I think there's generally a rookie kind of fear in talking to teams like if they feel like vindicated or scouted, but I've found that's not true like at all. People love talking during competitions. They love talking strategy, talking robots. It's something that everyone likes to get together. So I wish I had done this a lot more in my first year, but I would love to just go to competitions and talk to other teams and build relationships with other teams that last months and months before you see each other at the next one, but you still come back and that's my team that I'm rooting for. So that's my suggestion.
That's fantastic, Muskan. And what about you, Daniel?
So one piece of advice I would give to a first year team is to just trust in yourself and your team. Now, from my experience, you can't do everything by yourself in first. First is like a collaboration. So, in terms of building, coding, and presentation wise, everything is a team effort, and everything just goes so much more smoother, and everything's so much more fun when you work with a team.
That's great, great advice. All right, I'm going to pass it over to our panelists, and I think you have some questions for each other. So maybe Muskan, do you want to take it away?
I do. So I wanted to ask this question to Ella because I know you've been working as a captain, doing logistics on your team and stuff before. So I'm wondering, how do you keep your team like a safe and healthy environment for everyone for the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great question. Honestly, my team has struggled with this in the past, and it like first emphasizes equity, diversity, inclusion. All of that is super important. And it's important within your team to help you guys work together super well. So what my team found helpful was truthfully creating a code of conduct. And I know it sounds really formal and gross, but it's super helpful. Um, we basically just outlined what do we want our team environment to look like with specific examples. And that is key because it creates like a reality to these words that we always use. And then we got to the uncomfortable part, which is what do we do if somebody's not following this? What do we do if like this behavior continues? And there's no right or wrong way to answer it. But what's important is that you create these channels to address issues and to address conflicts when they arise. And you continue to foster open communication and curiosity within your team. It honestly, creating the code of conduct was like a big turning point for my team. We all felt super united. Like, I super recommend it even as a team building activity, but it also helped keep our team really a safe space. Now I have the next question, and I wanted to ask Chloe, because you have so much experience on FRC. You've done so many years. I was wondering, how do you build team relationships?
Yeah, that's a good question. So building team relationships in first is such a big thing. And what we've done as our team to help like foster relationships with other team is we just start reaching out to teams. We and along with a couple other teams in our area many years ago, we had helped start what we call Waterloo Wellington First. So all the teams in the Waterloo and Wellington region, there's 9 of us. We all work together and we'll share like a practice field space and tools and knowledge. So if there's a team struggling, with coding or with CADing, we have like channels to reach out to mentors on other teams and ask them questions. But I'm not saying like you need to start this big thing with teams in your area, but the biggest thing is to just start reaching out to teams. So if you've got questions, you can shoot them an email or message them on Instagram or connect with them at events. But yeah, that's the biggest thing for making relationships within first. And then I've got a question for Daniel, because you've got such great FTC experience. And then there's an engineering portfolio in FTC. So do you want to talk a little bit about what it is, and then also your amazing tips for rookies trying to start one?
Sure. So the engineering portfolio is part of your submission for your presentation. So at first so there's 2 parts to the competition. There's your actual like robot competition. There's also a presentation in front of judges. So for FTC, part of that is a submission of an engineering portfolio, which is a 15-page documentation of basically your robot and your team. So it's kind of like the story, the timeline of like what you guys did during the season, but also it can also be about the outreach that you guys do, the different events that you do, and also just kind of like how you guys worked throughout the season as a team. So one tip I would definitely have for rookie teams writing an engineering portfolio is to do it in parallel with building and coding, because you never ever want to be up late at night a day before competition trying to write a 15-page engineering portfolio, because trust me, I learned that the hard way and it is not fun. So please, whatever you do, just try to do it in parallel so that also the information is kind of cleaner and it's more accurate instead of just trying to remember something that happened 2 months ago.
That's awesome. We all know those late night cram sessions before competitions. And then how would you balance the technical and the non-technical aspects of your portfolio?
So I think that really depends on the team, because the technical and non-technical aspects kind of align with what you want to tell to the judges, right? Because I know for my team, right, sometimes our bot isn't like the greatest in terms of like its scoring capabilities. So sometimes we kind of go on like the technical side and we just try to like show them our CAD designs, like our whiteboard drawings and everything like that, trying to emphasize the judges like what the idea of the robot is and like the unique features. And also sometimes we go into like the outreaching, like what we do outside of our community, trying to promote first and trying to promote that Steam field, right? Because the portfolio is kind of like your big gateway into the awards, which definitely help a lot if you guys want to qualify into provincials, which trust me, great. You got provincials is so much fun. You meet a lot of exceptional teams. And yeah, so I really think it depends on the team. So if you guys are feeling more your technical side weaker, I'd say emphasize on the technical side. And if your outreach is like a little weak, I would say probably try to emphasize that. And it could also be vice versa. If one side's stronger, emphasize that. If the other's stronger, emphasize that. So, CG, I know with your years of expertise in designing and building, I just want to ask you, what do you think is the most important subsystem for this year's FTC season?
So, in my opinion, the most important subsystem of any season would be the drivetrain. Because not only does it serve as the foundation of your whole robot, it also dictates mobility, which is essential for every season. Not even in FTC exclusively. It is also a very key component in FRC as well.
So that's great. Can you actually just like elaborate on like the different drivetrain types and like their disadvantages and advantages and what you kind of suggest is like the best kind of overall design?
All right, so I'll just quickly go through a few drivetrains. So the three most common would be X-Drive, Mecanum, and Tank. But in FTC, we're slowly starting to see even swerves come out onto the competition field. So let's start off with Tank. It is literally 4 motors, and it is the cheapest, easiest to make, easiest to program, and easiest to control. It is really easy, like you can get used to it really easily because it functions in the same way like you drive a car. You turn and they go forward. It's also very dissimilar to like Asphalt 8 if you're like into playing car games. However, the major downside of Tank Drive is that it has a very slow turning speed. So next up, we have X Drive. So the advantages of this are that it is holonomic, is relatively easy to make, and it also has an extremely fast turning speed. This becomes especially useful if your robot is unturreted, but it is the slowest when it comes to straight movement. And then next off, we have Mecanum, which is holonomic. It's pretty fast in every direction, and it's also one of the most common ones. However, it could be expensive, and and is very difficult to program for the first time. So just to throw a fun one in there, we also have Swerve, which is when the wheels literally rotate in the direction you want to go. It is extremely fast turning speed and extremely fast in straight speed. It's just really fast. However, it is really hard to create, as it is really hard to design, extremely hard to program, and it is pretty hard to build. It is also very expensive, and another consideration is that it does take up more ports. So my personal recommendation, I would say just try Tank, X-Drive, and Mecanum. Just try them all, whichever one you like the most. But generally speaking, Mecanum does tend to work the best. However, I will like to talk to Muskan, as I know your team really, really likes to use custom parts. So how do teams get access to custom parts?
So custom parts are definitely a big part of my team's experience, at least. And my biggest suggestion for finding things to customize, because obviously we have our kit of parts that covers most of our bases. But if we're looking for something extra special, the most important thing, in my opinion, to consider is the actual function of what you are looking for. Because my two main suggestions in how to get custom parts are either 3D printing or metal cutting and laser printing, because these work very well a lot of the time. But depending on what your part is going to do, something a lot of teams forget is choosing the right material is super important. Otherwise, you're not going to have something that's going to function for the entire year or work exactly how you want to. So if you're working on a custom part that's going to be kind of internal to your robot, work on a certain subsystem and be shielded from all the pressures of gameplay, I strongly suggest looking into 3D printing, doing a lot of research into the different kinds of filament and materials you can use, their strengths and what they're meant for. 3D printing does take a lot of knowledge of CAD and knowing how to create supports and stuff. But if you're working with something that is going to be exposed to a lot of pressure or potential to have damage, if it's going to be on the outer side of your robot, maybe going to be hitting things, it's definitely something that you want to be looking at, finding metal or a stronger material that you can get custom printed around. And I often just reach out to different companies and see who is willing to offer a sponsorship, or if we have the funds for the year, create some kind of partner with them. But on that note, custom parts can be very expensive sometimes, depending on what you're trying to do. And I'm a huge fan of Chloe's team over here, who got managed to be sponsored by Google. So I would love to hear some tips and tricks on how you acquire sponsors.
Of course. So the biggest resource that any team has is parents and family members. We always talk at our meetings, like there's a student on your team and you've got like two parents who are working at different companies. That's two potential companies or businesses that can sponsor you. So FRC teams require a lot of money to run, and so do FTC teams. So getting sponsors just makes your team easier. But how we look at it is parents are something that we can always chat to, because if your parent approaches their company and they're like, hey, my kid's on a robotics team, they're learning all these awesome skills and they're building these sick robots because the robots look super cool, then they would be more inclined. Now, it doesn't always work with every company, but we always get students to talk to their parents and family members just to see, who we might end up with. So on the topic of getting funds for teams, I wanted to ask Ella a question because you've got tons of experience with this. So how do you seek grants to keep your team financially stable?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not the flashiest part of robotics, but it's crucial to the success of your team, as you mentioned. If you're a rookie team, start with the First Canada website. They got a ton of grants to help teams get on their feet. They're great about that. If you're beyond that point, start with your school board. School boards often have a lot of grants and a lot of money available to these sort of things. They won't list it on their website, but if you email them and you write up a little thing about like, oh yeah, here's why you should sponsor us, here's why we're so cool, here's why we're so helpful to the school community, they will often have a lot of things available to help you. After that, check with your community organizations, your community centers, your cultural centers, your Rotary clubs. Like any of those things are often willing to help youths. Thing to note, if you are applying to diversity-based grants, which a lot of the larger organizations will be, make sure you keep good track of your demographics on your team. It's kind of an uncomfortable topic, but if it can get you the money that you need to stay afloat, super worth it. Definitely do it. And of course, as Karthik and ZG mentioned at the beginning, just apply to everything. Try everything. It never hurts. Even if you don't think it's the perfect fit, do it. Can't hurt. Now, I suck about this because I don't like talking to judges, but I wanted to ask Chloe, because you're an FRC, you're an FRC representative. How do you prepare for judges?
So I have I've done tons of judging because I also had experience in FLL. And the biggest thing you can do to prepare for a judge's interview is make yourself a know-it-all. There's a bit of a bad connotation with being a know-it-all, but on a robotics team, you need to know everything. So for I know FTC and FRC judging is a little bit different. So I'll talk about the FRC side. At a competition, the judges will come to your pit. So they'll come to you and they'll chat with you. Generally, they come in sets of 3 just so that they all get, a different perspective about the things that you're saying. But you'll have a set of judges that will ask you about your robot. So the things you like about your robot, they'll ask you to explain your subsystem. So making sure whoever your representative is for the team knows what your robot does and can explain it really well. And then you'll have a set of judges that ask you about, your outreach and how you sustain your team and how your team runs as a whole. So what are your team's core values? How do you establish that? And just the organization of your team. So I suggest having one person who's this all-knowing being and is super comfortable and super talkative, and loves talking with judges. So yeah.
Now, Daniel, thank you so much for that, Chloe. You're on FTC. How is that different? How do you prepare for the judges' interviews?
So for us, our judges' interviews are actually in a room. So our judges are going to sit there and we're basically assigned to a room. So at competition, the first thing you do is your judges' interview. So how I would prepare typically my team is that we do a quick run through the day before and a couple minutes before our judges' interview, just to make sure we're on time. because this is a quick warning. For your judges interview, you do have a certain amount of time. I think specifically it's 5 minutes. So you want to make sure that you are within that time frame and that you don't go over, because the judges will stop you if you go over that time limit.
All right, Ella, I think you want to talk to Daniel a little bit more about the judging and materials.
Oh, yes, thank you. Totally forgot about that. Do you suggest bringing any other like materials or slides to your presentations?
So that really depends on the team. So my team, we typically bring in like pictures and things like that of our previous robots and of course our CAD designs. But if you guys are going to bring a lot of stuff like a Bristol board or something to set up, I would recommend that it has to be something small, because again, for that 5 minutes, setting up whatever materials you have does take a chunk of that time away. So once you enter that room and like you start your presentation, the setup does count for your time. So obviously, like bring like you guys can bring like something small. So my team, we bring our team mascot, like a green chicken that we always have, and at the end we always squeak it in front of the judges. And we also, of course, bring pictures and everything like that, and then some other designs that are quick and won't take too much of our time, so that we can just talk and also get all of our points across within the time limit. Yeah. So, Muskan, I know you have a lot of experience in coding, so I just want to ask, like, how did you get started in programming? Because I know that's kind of a weird field to get into if you have like no knowledge whatsoever.
So I'd say getting started in programming, at least for FTC, there's a whole world of different options that you have. Me personally, before I joined FTC, I had some programming experience. So I had a little bit of background to help me out. But if you want to get started in programming and you don't know where to go at all, we have three different ways that we can program in FTC. The simplest way I would suggest for beginners who don't have a programming background would be to use the FTC Blocks program, which comes with your control hub if you set it up with your driver station. But if you're trying to learn and get the ropes around, my strongest suggestion is to use First Canada's resource FTC Sim. It lets you program a robot in a virtual space without having to actually use it on your real robot. So it really helps you kind of understand the different concepts that go behind robot programming and how it's a little bit different than computer science in some sense. And that can get you to prepare to work on a real robot, even if you're using blocks. But more commonly, I would say teams use something called onbot Java, which is honestly the same thing as blocks. It's just typed in, because sometimes really long strings of code can get irritating to swipe over. But if you're trying to transition from blocks to onbot Java, FTC Sim has a really, really cool feature. It's a button that says convert to onbot Java. So if you're trying to learn how to script code, you can see directly how the block code that works for you and that's amazing for you is translated into Java and get you to learn a new language in a new way. And the third option I mentioned is Android Studio. Android Studio is the same thing as onbot Java. It's mostly an IDE that teams use to make things a little bit easier to work with, but I'd say the largest advantage of it is how easy it is to integrate with other technologies. So if you're using something like a webcam, some kind of atypical sensors, or any other kind of dependencies that you want to use in your code that you wouldn't otherwise be using, that's when more advanced teams will be using things like Android Studio. Yeah, those are my tips for getting started in programming.
All right, yeah, that's great. So actually on the topic of coding, right? I wanted to ask you and ZG if you guys have any tips on localization and kind of just in general what it is.
All right, yeah. So I can talk about this in the aspect of driving coders. So driving coders are basically sensors inside your motor that keep track of how much your motors has been activated. This makes it really easy to like keep track of like how much has been rotated, essentially how much has been used. And it is really useful for precise tasks like 4 bars or linear slides. However, there are a few limitations, but Muskan does have a solution for this.
Great. So I would say something that teams use very frequently instead of drive encoders is odometry pods. They're used actually, I would say, in equal amounts. But what I like to use is odometry pods, which use external encoders. It's the same concept. You're tracking how many rotations your robot has made, but these external encoders very often have a much higher pulse per rotation, so more ticks going through one rotation. A very common one in FTC, the rev through bore, has something like 30,000. So it gets very, very precise. And odometry pods are small external dead wheels that don't have any movement of their own that you can attach to your robot. And they can effectively create a coordinate system of your field for you that you can work with on your robot. And there's a ton of different ways that you can do this. Some teams make their own kind of pipelines and programs to work with odometry pods. But if you're just getting started in the world of odometry and encoders and you don't know where to get started, a resource I strongly suggest checking out is learnroadrunner.com. Roadrunner is a program created by an American FTC team that helps you work with odometry, work with you can use it for drive encoders too, I believe, to use encoders to create a fantastic autonomous program to make it very reliable. So if you're struggling with autonomous, kind of figuring out how to get started on going to the correct place at the right time, I strongly recommend odometry and Roadrunner. On that note, I would like to pass it back to ZG and ask how you avoid tipping, because I know that's a huge part of the FTC season this year, since we're going to be extending really high.
Yeah, so my recommendation to avoid tipping is keep your robot's center of mass as low as possible. You also want to make your base as wide as possible and make your robot as short as possible when you're moving at high speeds. This has something to do with inertia. And a common strategy is to use a metal or like a heavy material base plate to lower the center of mass. I'm not telling you to put like a brick on your robot, but generally you want to have a large amount of mass at the bottom to keep it more stable. You also want to make sure that your robot is in the most compact form when you're moving quickly. So when you need to extend, and then for instance of this season, you would want to shorten it back down when you're trying to move across the field. But now moving on to something less technical. So Ella, how do you keep your time on a managed schedule?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, my first year, our team was a mess. We were like still building our robot 3 days before the competition. It was bad. Don't recommend it. What I do recommend is just creating just like a timeline. When do you want your robot to be done? I generally recommend like at least a month before your first competition, so you have time to program, troubleshoot, do all that kind of stuff. Then you figure out, when do I want each element to be done? When do I want the drivetrain or any of that? And you create deadlines for each of that. And then what you do is you make your practice schedule work with those deadlines. So what we do on my team is we have 2 main meetings per week. And then if we're like, oh no, we're not going to finish this in time, we have an extra day that is like a reserve day. So if we need the practice, we add it in that week. It works really well for us, and it's not amazing, but we do stay on track most of the time. What I also recommend is just setting an intention for every meeting. It can help people stay motivated and everybody working with a task. Just like overall, make the deadlines work for you and try not to push them.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more organized than my second year. Like I was pulling in full-time hours a week before the competition. So speaking of competitions, how would you logistically prepare for the upcoming competitions?
Yeah, I think there's like 2 main parts to that. The first is your like box of things you're bringing. So for that, you want to make sure you have like doubles of everything. Things are going to fail. It's okay. But you need to make sure you have backups. And if things are consistently failing, bring triples. It's fine. It'll be okay. Make a checklist of everything that you need, and then pack everything, and then unpack it, and then pack it again to make sure you have everything. I know it seems extra, but my team literally forgot our Allen keys one year, and we're the guardians of the Allen keys. It happens. It's okay. Everybody will be really nice. People lent us our Allen keys, but try to make sure you have them. It's just more helpful. Second part of that, make sure everybody knows what they're doing at competitions. They're really busy days. So who's driving? Who's talking to judges? Who's pit crew? Who's carrying the robot from place to place? Make sure everybody knows their role. make sure, especially your first year members, know what to bring. Competitions are really long. Making sure everybody has enough water, enough snacks, all that stuff is really good. Also, snacks, sharing with other teams, great way to make friends. Totally recommend. Competitions can be really fun, and they're a lot better when you're not running around asking to borrow other people's phones keys. Now, we've talked a lot about FTC, but I'm wondering, Chloe, how do you think teams can prepare for FRC season before kickoff actually happens?
So yeah, right now it's our FRC off season, which is such a great time to sharpen the skills on your team. So I know a lot of teams, they'll start the school year, they'll get their team ready, but they won't actually do anything until January. But something that our team does is during the fall, we'll have lots of workshops so that our new students can, begin to work on these skills, and then students who have a little bit of experience can work on sharpening these skills and refresh their brain before January, so that once you hit that January kickoff weekend, you are ready to go and ready to be fully focused and working on your robot. So we'll host workshops on like CAD and programming and then mechanical design, and we'll also work on tool safety and tool training and just making sure that our students feel comfortable in the environment that we're working in. And we'll have either senior students or mentors be teaching these workshops. But one thing that we do is we'll do a full game analysis run through. So we'll pick a team or like a game year from like 15 years ago, and we'll watch the kickoff video, and we'll run through like, okay, what are the rules? How do we score? That kind of deal, so that our team knows what we're doing for our kickoff weekend. So yeah.
All right, we are running out of time here, but I think Miriam, you've got one last question for the group.
I do. Okay, guys. So, what is one piece of advice that you've gotten from someone from the first community that has stuck with you?
I can go first on that. My first year, I was working with a mentor, and what they said to me is to just stick with it, especially in your first years. It's not always going to be the most fun. You're kind of figuring out the ropes. You don't know your team as well. You're not sure how all the building works and how all the rules work. And it's not always the most fun. And that's okay. It's okay to feel like that. It's normal. But if you stick it out, robotics is super fun, and it is just so worthwhile. Like, even back in September, I was having my doubts again, but robotics is like the favorite part of my day now. So just stick it out.
All right, and then I will go next. So the biggest piece of advice, I talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but you get out what you put into it. And I met my mentor like 7 years ago who told that to me, and it stuck with me for that long. So it just reminds myself that, when we're meeting like 5-6 times a week and staying up till morning and going to these long competitions, that all of this, I'm doing it for a reason, and that it will all pay off in the future for me.
I think mine is a little less inspirational than yours, but it was brought to me by my brother, who told me to be very conscious of the resources that you have around you. And I think I can't speak for FRC, but I know FTC at least has a whole mound of resources from FTC Docs, which I strongly recommend. It's a new resource for you to check out. Of course, the First Ontario Slack, very awesome resource. Everyone's super helpful. First has a lot of different opportunities for you to improve your robot and look for things for outreach. So if you are in the first community has your back, and there's 100 ways you can seek help if there's something you're looking for.
Yeah, I guess I could go next. So one thing that I've experienced personally within robotics is that when people are willing to put in the work, they will be good at something. Like, there's never a case where someone has worked hard and not had good results. So my advice would be that everyone's good at something, and like when you make everyone's skills work together cohesively, something's good is bound to happen. Like, only good things can possibly come out of that.
All right, Daniel, why don't you close it out here?
All right, so for me, this actually comes from my teacher and my mentor. She told me to always stick with first. Now, I didn't really get what she meant at first during my first years, because it was definitely a struggle trying to keep up my schoolwork and also attend the meets. But I think she was definitely right. First has offered me so much opportunity that I could never imagine when I was younger. and I've also seen it with her daughter. She used to be a member of the youth council. Um, it's incredible what FIRST can do for you if you put in the work, and truly this program is one of a kind.
Such great advice. Hey, youth council, this was fantastic. So many different tips on so many different areas. Thank you so much for putting this together. This is going to make the FIRST community stronger. I just hope that lots of people are watching this. They're taking notes. They're going to rewatch it on YouTube and, or re-listen to it on Spotify, because this was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming today. And I think we'll see all of you at the Youth Summit in a couple of weeks, right? Folks, if you want to get insights and advice like this, sign up for the Youth Summit. All of them will be there. Pick their brains. These are some experts. These are some superstars right here. All right. Thank you, Youth Council. This was fabulous. Folks, we will be back with our next segment with some Youth Council alumni in just a moment after a word from one of our sponsors.
When I was applying for co-ops, I was really looking for a place that would allow me to have the greatest amount of experience. And since Hatch is such a big company, I knew that I would be able to get involved with all the different groups that the company offers.
What surprised me about working at Hatch was the amount of responsibility that you're given very quickly, like once you start.
There's so many opportunities to learn, not just from specialists in the field, but also from something like Lunch and Learns, or even Safety Shares. So it's not something technical that I'm learning, but something that might help me in my everyday life.
For me to be able to just walk into their office and ask them whatever I want, to schedule a meeting whenever I want, to be able to work directly with them on building things was an insanely good experience.
As a student, I am as much valued as the other employees that are here.
I enjoy working here because people are very friendly, and this environment that they created has been more than absolute perfect.
All right, folks, we are back. Miriam, that was a good segment, right?
It was so well done.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Great work by your fellow Youth Council members. But now we're going to bring out a couple Youth Council alumni who were interns for FIRST Canada this summer. That's right, a FIRST Canada alum, second-year environmental science student at Dalhousie University, and winner of the Don Bosey Leadership and Innovation Scholarship, Julia McFarlane. Hey, Julia.
Hey, Karthik, how's it going?
Good to see you again. And your co-worker from this summer, also FIRST Canada alum of the FIRST Canada Youth Council, first-year student at the University of North Carolina, and winner of the Canadian Women in STEM Scholarship, Maria Marie. Hey, Maria.
Hey, Karthik, how you doing?
I was just excited to do like my Ray Clay voice with the Michael Jordan introduction from North Carolina.
Of course. Basketball season has already started. That we had a game this past Monday, and the vibe of this city was electric. You can't beat it.
It's amazing. Both the men's and women's team in North Carolina, super good. Also, the South Carolina women's team. I know they're your rival, but man, they looked good yesterday. They looked so good. So it's exciting. Basketball season. We're not here to talk about basketball. I'll try and tone it down here a little bit. But hey, so the two of you had opportunities to be interns for FIRST Canada this summer, and we thought that our community might want to know a little bit about what it's like to be an intern. So maybe we'll just go to each of you. Maybe we'll start with Maria. What was your main project or projects this summer?
Yeah, so I'd say I had two main projects this summer. So the first one was offering in-person first Lego robot sessions with actual students in classes. So something that I was really excited about for this summer was that the in-person sessions were restarting. Thankfully, COVID guidelines had allowed us to do that. And so that actually allowed me to go in person and work with new classes every day, either in one-part session or two-part sessions, and actually guide students in grade 4 to 8 through the process of building a small robot. And so that was really interesting because seeing the unique designs that different students came up with and seeing the unique approaches they took to the coding challenges. One of the main challenges we had was trying to have the students program a robot to be able to stay within a blue box, but knock out as many cups as possible. And there were lots of really cool designs. The second main project that I worked on was the FTC Sim virtual camps. And so these were camps that were done virtually. So I would join the class via Zoom, and I would, using the FTC Sim website, I would show them how to program a robot virtually and just go over the basic programming skills.
Very cool. And what about you, Julia?
I had a few different projects this summer. So I started with the RISE workshops, which Maria were talking about. These were our in-person Spike Prime robot sessions that we did with classrooms. Those are super fun. I really enjoyed those. And then once school ended and we were into the summer months, I was in charge of the registration process behind our FTC summer camps and our FRC in-person summer camps. So lots of registration stuff behind the scenes. I was also going in person twice a week to teach with Strides and their autistic development program. I taught two different age groups, how to build Spike Prime robots and program over the course of 8 weeks. And then did a whole bunch of other various different tasks. I was working with an organization called Seeds of Hope with their summer camp. I was at the CNE by the end of the summer. I organized workshops to teach young women how to mentor FLL. Robotics team. We were also at the golf tournament together and the youth summit. So there's a whole bunch of different things, lots of different things this summer.
It was busy, and right, Julia, you were there for the full 4 months, and Maria, you were there for the first half of the summer, right?
Yeah, just for the first half of the summer.
Very cool. I don't know, Miriam, do you have a question for our interns?
I do. So I noticed you guys are talking so much about your summer. What was the favorite part of it?
I would say my favorite part of the summer was just being able to see the joy on all the kids' faces when they finally got it. Because I will say that there were times and there were specific programming challenges we had to do that didn't necessarily come easy, but seeing the persistence and the dedication to not only work together, but persevere through challenges, I think really showed like the lessons that FIRST is trying to convey to students shining through. And even just in a short program, I saw a lot of kids interested in being like, how can we continue this? And even teachers afterwards being like, we want to continue this. How can we continue to have FIRST robotics involved in our schools? So that was definitely my favorite part of the job.
There's nothing cooler than seeing a kid who's it's one thing when someone gets something easy right, but when they get something hard right that they've gotten wrong first or they've struggled with, that's just a cool sort of feeling. So that's great. Julia?
I loved everything about the job, but probably I really enjoyed the connections that I made. So I got to work with 3 other interns this summer, so I consider them really good friends. We had lots of good laughs, and even like all the other coworkers at First Canada. I worked closely with Shanika and Jess this summer, and then also Joanna, lots of other people. And I also really did love working with the kids and getting to see them develop, especially with Strides when I was there every single week, twice a week, working with these kids and seeing like at the start how they had no clue how to do anything by the end, like when I would give them a challenge and they were so excited. And every single time I walked through that door, they would all cheer and be like, Julia's here, like Julia's here. Like that makes your day when you see that. And it was awesome. I enjoyed it a lot.
That's fantastic. It's really neat because sometimes you ask people like, what was your favorite part of your internship wherever they are? And sometimes they like have to pause or whatever because they struggle. But like you two right away were like, oh yeah, there's things that I loved, which is a good sign. It's a good sign of a good workplace. So that, tying into that, what was the work environment like at First Canada for you two from like the perspective of someone who you two have both been around the program for a long time and you've both been members of the youth council. And then what was it like being on the other side, being like First Canada staff?
Yeah, I really enjoyed being a First Canada staff, and I felt that the transition from being on the youth council to being a staff was seamless. Everyone was trusted me and had the utmost faith, and I really appreciated that I was given so much responsibility and trusted that it would be carried out. And I feel like that helped me develop my confidence actually going into university, but also helped me develop time management skills, because as it is a remote position, I was responsible for, when I wasn't doing in-person workshops or doing virtual workshops, making sure that other deadlines I had to meet or other registration information I was responsible for collecting was collected. But also just like the weekly check-in meetings we would have still made me feel like I was in a very supportive environment.
That's great to hear. Julia.
Yeah, I have worked in a few different places. Like I've done lots of extracurriculars. I've gone to work with many different groups of people, and I have to say, staff at First Canada and this summer was probably my favorite. Like everyone is just super sweet and like just I don't want to say laid back, but it's like relaxed. Like everyone does trust you to get your work done, and like I wasn't fearful that like if I made a mistake, I'd be punished for it or I'd be yelled at. Like I was just so excited to go into work every day, and you like felt supported too, and like everyone was willing to teach you and like be like little mentors for you. It was great. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Having gone to the University of Waterloo, where you do so many different co-op experiences, I would say there was times where I had jobs where I had the same sorts of feelings that you did, and other times where I didn't, or whatever. Like there's such a reassuring feeling to knowing that when you're going to work every day, it's like, oh yeah, this is what I want to be doing, and it's not going to be awful. And yeah, it'll be hard at times, I'm going to be busy, but everyone's still going to be kind and friendly. And I guess that's part of gracious professionalism, I guess, if you think of it that way. Miriam, what do you think? You have another question for Julia and Maria?
Yeah, so like in terms of starting or like looking for an internship, what advice would you give someone who's looking for that?
I think I would definitely recommend that you start looking early. It is so easy for deadlines to sneak up on you, and especially if you're a high school senior or if you're a first year, deadlines come up quickly and suddenly you have so many projects due. You want to make sure you're looking early. Next, I would also recommend that you have multiple people look over your resume and cover letter that you're going to be submitting. Obviously, you should believe and be confident in your own work, but it never hurts to have an extra set of eyes just to look over and be like, could you explain what this acronym means? Or could you be a little bit more clear about how this experience specifically makes you a better candidate for this job? Just having those extra eyes will really, really help.
No, I totally agree. That's really good advice. What about you, Julia?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Maria is saying. It's so easy to create something and you're like, oh, this is a perfect resume, but then someone else looks over it and notices a mistake that you didn't see. Like for my resume, especially, like I made it, I was like, oh, this is great. But then I went into like a position where I had to hand in my resume, and then they were looking over it and had a question, and I was like, oh, you're right. Like that could have been caught if I had someone read over it, right? Definitely start looking early. There's people I know right now who already have internships for next summer. So like they got it a month ago, but here already like a month into school and they already have internships lined up for next summer, which was crazy. And definitely use your connections. I heard all the youth council talking about asking parents workplaces for sponsorships. Same thing applies for internships. Use who you know. You can reach out to your sponsors. Yeah, that's what I have.
The two of you talked about favorite parts of your job or whatever. When you look back on this, it's been a couple of months or whatever, but maybe in a few 5 years from now, when you look back on this, do you think there's going to be something that you accomplished that you're going to be specifically proud about, whether it's big picture or maybe just like a specific story with an individual student?
Yeah,
Right.
so there's one story I have from one of the Spike Prime workshops I was doing. I believe it was a grade 5 class at one of the Catholic schools. And there was a student there, a girl who really wasn't interested. She was having some issues with some of her friends in the class. She didn't really want to build the robots. And so I had to spend a little bit of extra time convincing her and kind of working with her to be like, okay, well, it's okay. We compromised and said, okay, you don't have to work with the other students in your group, but what if I give you a robot and you work with your teacher? And And so she said, okay, we can do this. And then as she started getting into the process and building the robot with her teacher, I could see the smile growing on her face, and her, when she finished it, her being so proud, and then being like, okay, now I want to start the coding challenges. And then even as it took her a little bit longer to finish the coding challenges, every time she finished one, and what we used to do is we used to give each student a stamp once they finished a challenge. Every time she got a stamp, I'd give her a high five, and I would just see again that smile grow. So honestly, having that support of the engaged teacher there to make sure that that student still had the best experience, even if they didn't come into the day with the most positive mindset or in the best headspace. That's probably one of my favorite memories from my internship this summer.
That's a fantastic story. And it just goes to show the amount of impact that a teacher or a mentor or an instructor can have on a student. What about you, Julia?
I am going to say, so at the beginning of the summer, I really didn't like to drive a lot. Like I was a very nervous driver. And so every single day I was going really far. Well, not so far. It was a reasonable amount of driving, but it was more driving than I would be comfortable with at the beginning of the summer. And then by the end of the summer, I was such a pro driver. I was driving this without even hesitate. Yeah, that was me in my car going to work every day, going to go teach the kids. And I am very proud of how like I overcame that and overcame that nervousness. And by the end, like I was very independent going to work, and I am proud of how much I grew as like a facilitator and as a teacher, and how comfortable I got speaking in front of these classrooms. Like you could definitely see the difference from my very first day to the end teaching the students, especially with the Strides group when I was pretty much in charge of all the lesson plans. So I made the lesson plans for every single session, and I got to see how the students developed. So that's something that was my project that I was very proud of this summer.
Yeah, and like a lot of times people, when asked a question like, so it is something you're proud of, it's almost like you think, it's like, oh, like the impact to have on others, but it's good to be proud of your own accomplishments too, and your own personal development, especially in an internship, because that's part of the goal. Like, obviously goal number one is to earn money to help pay for school and pay for life and do all those sorts of things. But like, we're always, not just an internship, but in any job, it's about your own development. We're always on a path to development. Like Miriam was a grade 11 student. You're going to be a different person in June than you were in September, and that's your development path. And it's really cool when you can look at that. And I kind of think it ties to what Miriam was saying about writing a letter to your future self. Like, and I'm going to ask a question about advice that you have for interns, but a neat piece of advice might be is before you start an internship, write a letter to yourself at the start of like, this is who I am now, and then kind of see what that looks like in September. So like, I'm just kind of stealing Miriam's advice here because it was so good from earlier in the show, but it's great. But on that topic, Julia and Maria, you two clearly have gained a lot out of this internship. I would love to know what advice you have for students on how to get the most out of their internships.
Yeah, I would say definitely the most important thing is to come with an open mind. I know that in the past, I have personally struggled with imposter syndrome. And I know that especially as a young person going into a new environment, you might be feeling like, oh, they don't believe in me. They don't trust me. I'm just there. I can't really make a big impact, but keep an open mind. You never know what new opportunities might arise because of the summer, but you also never know the unique ideas and the unique perspective that you bring as an intern. There's a reason they chose you. And so just be open to any of the potential that can come out of the summer. Also, don't be afraid to ask for feedback. I know sometimes that it can be hard to receive criticism, or sometimes it can be taken in a negative way, but feedback is really what helps you grow and what helps you do better for the future. So whether it's like, oh, how can I improve my presentation skills, or how can I improve my writing skills? All of those are tangible skills that you can take on, and not only to school, but to future workplaces and even just to your future relationships.
What about you, Julia?
That was great advice, Maria. I would say definitely come with an open mindset, right? Be willing to learn. I know at one point, Karthik and we had sat down and we had gone over how to properly respond to emails, which is something like so simple that you wouldn't even think of. But like just that one meeting, that definitely helped a lot going forward. As well, I would say definitely the imposter syndrome that Maria was talking about. If you don't have that confidence, fake it until you make it, and then eventually you're gonna believe it, and that growth will come. Yeah, it's definitely a super fun experience and definitely a once in a lifetime experience as an intern. You gotta take advantage of it. That's what I would say. Take advantage of your internship.
I have to say, the two of you were very, very good at the advice that you're kind of giving right now. Because, Maria, I remember one time, you were working on, we were trying to get registrants for those FTC sim camps, and you kind of wrote to me, it's like, hey, can we talk about this or whatever? Because you were kind of worried, it's like, oh, the registrations aren't coming along, moving. It's like, no, you're doing great. This is actually good. It's going to get there. And I kind of told you that lots of these things when we're looking for registrants start off slowly and it's okay. And, but if you hadn't asked about that, there might have been doubt the entire time, and then Julia, you talk about that discussion we had about how to respond to tough emails. I mean, that discussion probably wouldn't have happened unless you had reached out and kind of said, hey, I had a weird email today or whatever. And it's like, okay, let's get together. Let's talk about it. Myself and another staff member, Lisa, we got on the call with you and figure stuff out. So like that's when you work in a good workplace, it's safe to ask those sorts of questions or whatever. And for like the high school students, and Miriam, I'm sure you recognize this too. It's like, it's like, go ask the teacher, like, hey, how can I do better? Like, I want to get better at this. I want to get better on my robotics team. I want to be better on the cross country team. I want to be better at math class or whatever. And like that, you're surrounded by people who want to help, which is pretty neat. Okay, so now we got to get to like the important questions. So, you probably got a lot of swag this summer from Swaggy Pete, Paul Keenan. I want to know, what was your favorite piece of First Canada swag you got this summer?
Oh, I have to say the red polo shirt. I had red hair at the time during my summer internship. It's actually kind of ironic. I have red hair again right now, but the red polo shirt, and it said first on it. And I felt like such an official, like, first staff member. I was like, this is my graduation from youth council to first staff. So that was my favorite piece of merch.
Nice. What about you, Julia?
I am going to agree with Maria on this one, but I'm also going to disagree. I really like the purple polo shirt. Purple is my favorite color. I had purple hair. But again, definitely, like, I have all the first swag. Started elementary school collecting my first swag, and then in high school I got my first youth council swag, and then as a staff, like the purple shirt says staff on the side. I just felt so fancy. You walk into your workshops with all your gear and you're like, I'm here to teach. So then you're it's a great feeling. And can I share a really quick story about what Karthik did? Yeah. Karthik on our golf tournament told us, doesn't matter what color shirt you wear. And then we show up and all of the staff had the same shirt color on, except for the interns. The interns had the other shirt color.
But hey, okay, not all the staff, because I think Shanika was wearing red too, wasn't she, in the intern color?
She might have been wearing red.
Yeah. So to be fair, like we were told very specifically it didn't matter. We just all landed on purple. I don't know how that happened, sort of deal. It's sort of good. Hey, Miriam, why don't you have you gotten your youth council swag for this year yet?
No, we're getting it at the youth summit.
Oh, are you? You want to tell Julia and Maria what you're getting this year? Because I think it's hilarious, actually. I'm not going to say it's great. It's just hilarious. I think it's hilarious. Maria, tell them what you're getting.
Okay, so I'm gonna save the best for last, but we're getting like a sweater, like zip up, and then we're also getting a cowboy hat.
No way.
A purple light up. Is it purple or is it blue?
I believe it was blue.
And it has lights too, right?
It does have lights.
I'm so jealous.
A light up cowboy hat sounds amazing.
That is amazing.
Someone suggested it, and then like I'm like, well, hey, you all do what you want to do or whatever. And then when they were going to have a vote, I thought it was like a meme that someone suggested it. And they had a vote, and I think like of the 18 people, 16 people voted for like the cowboy hat. And I'm like, okay, this is like, I'm like, are you all sure? Like, are you just bringing a meme to life? Are you going to actually do this? Like, we will wear it everywhere. Like
that's so amazing.
Yeah. So
I love
Does it have the logo on it too?
I think that's the plan.
Yeah, it does. It has like a little bin at the top that has the logo. Yeah.
I don't think we'd just be getting them like just a random cowboys hat.
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. You need to take a picture of all of you in the cowboy hats
I want to see it
at the youth summit for sure.
Absolutely.
We gotta do that one together. Julia Maria, before you go, anything that you want to say to the audience? Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to talk about?
I just want to say that I am absolutely blown away by the thoughtful advice provided earlier by the Youth Council. When I started on my robotics team, I'm former captain of Team 7712 of Mojo Robotics. Shout out to Mojo Robotics. We were a rookie team, and in our first season, we were blessed to have different mentors from other teams that supported us in our journey. But I can imagine that teams that are starting that might not have those same connections might have difficulties. So the plethora of resources that you all provided in such an eloquent and organized way is really, really helpful. So you should be so proud of yourselves. And the last thing I will say is just believe in yourself. You don't have to get it right the first time, but as long as you keep going and you keep trying and you keep wanting to get better, that's all that matters.
Fabulous advice, Maria. Julie, anything you want to throw out there?
That's great. I also have to say I'm very impressed with the Youth Council this year. Everyone's answers to the questions were so amazing. I mean, Maria were texting about how great this new Youth Council seems. I would say I liked who was, I think Daniel had said, stick with first. I believe that was Daniel. Great advice. I really recommend it. Right before this session, I was on the phone with my best friend for, it's 8 years now. Can't be 8, 6 years now. And we met in elementary school through first, and we're still like second year of university, calling we're a little busier now, but calling every so often, connecting. You'll make lots of great friends, lots of great opportunities, lots of amazing people. Yeah, stick with it.
Well, Julia Maria, thank you for being amazing interns. Thank you for coming back. I know you're all busy. You're probably getting ready for midterms, all that sort of stuff. So thank you for making time. Make finals. Wow, time just flies. It's the holiday season, Thanks so much for all of that. Can't wait to see you all sometime soon. Thank you. All right, Miriam, that wraps up a great show. What did you think? This is your first time hosting First Canada Live. What do you think?
It was so fun. I loved it.
Yeah, you were fabulous. This was this was fun. This was great. This was good. I think part of the vibe is because I got the holiday lights up. I think that's also like bringing the energy here, getting set for Diwali and Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa, all of it. The lights are there. Next episode is going to be the first Tuesday in December, and the theme is teams doing cool stuff. So we're going to be bringing on a bunch of teams who've done some fun things there, including a team that was featured, actually, I don't want to spoil it yet. Just stay tuned to social media. You'll get the previews. You'll get everything like that. If you want to know about our show schedule, remember to subscribe, turn on notifications. Thank you to our producers for everything you've done. Thanks to everyone who is chatting today. It's been a great episode of First Canada Live, and we will see you next month. Bye, everyone. And sign up for the Youth Summit.